Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to take a look at referencing and also take a look at what is common knowledge. So as part of our session this afternoon, we've been looking at academic integrity and writing in your own words and how to make effective use of collaboration. And a lot of this has boiled down to making sure that you're acknowledging the author of the source or the voice that it comes from, and thinking about who said it, not where it is in the book, and writing it in your own words. And also that it's really good to explain ideas to other people, OU students, partners, cats and dogs in particular. So hopefully we are reassuring you, but we've got a lot of new students out there, and just to reinforce this whole idea that you're not expected to get everything right now. This is your year of making oodles and oodles of mistakes before it gets more serious at level 2 and 3. I'm only joking, but that is when it is often a lot more important to be acknowledging sources, looking for external sources, etc. So it's important to understand the concept of these, why they're so important as you develop as an academic, and also what to do and who to go to if you are unsure. So HJ and Zach on the hot desk. How's everyone this afternoon?
Yeah, they're brilliant. Lots of fantastic feedback. Everyone is engaged, talking about their studies, how to best prepare, just kind of coming off the back of writing in your own words, and that's just formed some amazing discussion between people, and lots of people helping each other out, which is great. Just carry on doing that.
And I thought I'd pop back because there was word of some shepherd's pie going round, so unfortunately people are talking about it at home, not here, so I've kind of missed out there. But the good thing is we had some great talk earlier about referencing and knowing exactly where to reference and what counts as common knowledge as well in another session. So a lot of people are really interested to see if we can nail down some referencing and sort of get more up to date with what we need to do for our assignments. And
Zach, I see your name is upside down.
Yes.
Is that because we are turning ideas on their head about our studies?
Well, in the last session, I think I was HJ for a little while, so we just thought we'd just mix and match it up a bit.
This is the whole thing with digital identities. One can be anyone, can't one? As long as you acknowledge your source. So, joining me are Fiona Durham from our fabulous library team, and also Jenny Alderman, who is another colleague in STEM. Now, Jenny is an academic conduct officer, as have been many of the people that we've talked to today. See, so if you do get in trouble, they're all really nice, aren't they? And she's been doing this role for 11 years and has handled well over 1,000 plagiarism cases, and has obviously overseen those outcomes for students. But she understands that many students don't understand what's required, which is a key point that we've been talking about today. You know, often these things are not done to cheat deliberately. It's all about knowing how and when to write in your own words and how and when to reference. So this session will be very useful. Fiona's part of our library team, who are fabulous, and they're going to be doing lots of sessions at our Refreshers orientation event. And also, if you're interested in what the library can do for you, again, on our YouTube channel, there is plenty of catch up, but we will be covering all of that next week. But the library supports students in a number of different ways, and in particular, they can help with referencing, as well as many things like literature searching and finding information and protecting your digital identity. So all sorts of very, very useful things. Thank you for coming along today. We've asked our students at home how they feel about referencing, and there's a word cloud there, so remember, if you can only think of one or two things, just put a full stop. And there's also, would you reference this source? Now, without any context, of course you would all say yes right now, because we know that referencing is important. But what we're going to do is we're going to use that widget as and when particular questions come up. So you don't need to fill it in quite now, but you can if you really, really want to. Okay, so we've got some passages from Wikipedia, a very common option for Open University students who often think that they will go and do some research because it doesn't quite make sense in this book, so they go and look it up in Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an amazing source of information, but it does have some flaws.
Yes, it certainly can do. You're absolutely right. Yes, so I think what we would like to ask people is, while we have a conversation, to ask them whether or not they would reference this, and then we'll come back to that a little bit later on and see what the response is.
Okay, so let's see what this is. Let's try and zoom in on it with our super bright studio lights. You might need to hold this up a little bit. Yes, there we go. Cold fusion, more science stuff I don't understand. Okay, so here we have a definition of cold fusion, originator and some information about it. You don't need to understand all of that in detail, everybody at home, yeah. So the question is,
what we're interested in is, you know, as a Wikipedia article, would you reference it?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in the widget that says, would you reference the source, you can put yes or no, or you're unsure. And then we'll find out what you've had to say about that. Okay. Going outside sources can be really useful for some students. We've been talking today about how some students can get stuck reading and they might need to shift something. Some students will look on YouTube. I've heard of lots of students going off and Googling talks on certain things, Khan Academy, for example, to explain certain concepts. We know that people are different learners as well, so sometimes reading can be really difficult. So we do want to encourage students to go off and gather information from varieties of sources, and Wikipedia is just one of those sources. From your perspective as an academic, Jenny, would you say it's a good idea for students to play around with those things if they don't make sense? Looking at these different sources.
I think the key there is if they don't make sense, because normally in the Open University we ask students to concentrate on using the materials that we provide. And it's fair to say, I think, that most students find that probably is enough for them. Because almost all students will tell you they have a very heavy workload in doing our modules. So we provide the materials, but we would always say if you have an interest in something or you would like to read round it, of course that's a very good thing. But what you would have to do is be very careful how you use the information you might find.
Yeah.
I mean, you've already mentioned that Wikipedia is a good source in many respects, but can be iffy, if I can put it that way. And I can tell you there are many, many other sites which are far more iffy than Wikipedia, but which come up, in my experience, very often. You know, and if I could say UK essays that pop up time and time again. Cases that I do for the law school are Law Teacher is a popular site, and there's an outfit called SlideShare, which again is something which comes up all the time. So, and they're not slides, which is interesting. So it's obviously a source of information, and so you do have to be very careful where you go and how you use these things.
Absolutely. So don't copy and paste chunks of those, or you'll end up with Jenny.
Yes, sadly, that is the case.
With a lot of writing in your own words to do. Okay,
Yes.
so we've asked whether people would reference the source. Now, 45% of them at last count said yes, 24% no, and 31% unsure.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, should we talk perhaps a little bit about what common knowledge is?
Yes.
Because
But I don't know
essentially,
what this cold fusion is.
It's certainly not common knowledge.
if I go back to my days when I did my science degree, I think I probably did know a bit about that, but I couldn't explain it now. Because this business of common knowledge is a subject where if something is common knowledge, then you don't have to reference it. But if we start to think what might constitute common knowledge, there are some characteristics of it. Firstly, that it's something that's very commonly and widely understood in your discipline as a student. Secondly, if you were to go to academic sources, not non-academic sources, because stuff gets copied from academic sources into non-academic sources freely without attribution. But if you go to academic sources and you find that it is not referenced, then that's a very good guide to the fact that you wouldn't have to reference it. It could equally be if it's, material information which has possibly many authors. So there isn't one person to attribute it to. And the other thing is that it's normally recognised as being easily accessible and verifiable. But I'd like to come back to that point because I think with modern technology, that can be quite a trap. So you could say, well, you wouldn't have to reference the dates of major world wars, for example, World War I and World War II, because those are known not only by people in the area of history, but by the general public as well. You wouldn't normally have to reference the dates of monarchs. If I remember rightly, Henry VIII reigned from 1509 to 1547 or something like that, so you wouldn't have to cite that. If you were in the area of science, you wouldn't have to reference periodic table symbols and things like that. You wouldn't have to reference common definitions of something like the two sorts of diabetes and things like that. Now, interestingly though, if we were to move on to something perhaps a little bit more complicated, we could take Pythagoras' theorem. Now, I thought when I looked at this that one would, well, I mean, in a sense it's self-reference, isn't it? We think it's Pythagoras. However, I did look behind the scenes a little bit there, and interestingly, long before he put that theorem together, in other words, sort of wrote it up, there were many cultures that had exactly the same idea. And indeed, there are many proofs that are either geometric or algebraic for Pythagoras' theorem. And interestingly, if you're a level 1 student, which I think, you know, largely our audience is today, then you wouldn't be expected to reference Pythagoras' theorem or the proof. However, if you were studying at level 3 and the question that you were answering in your assignment was going into much greater depth, then because there are a number of, you know, there'll be researchers in the area and authors and all of the rest of it, then you would be expected to reference it. So what we could conclude from this is that it's very subject specific. You have to know your subject reasonably well and what might be regarded as common knowledge. And when in doubt, make quite sure that you do reference. And if you could bear with another example, because it relates to this business of things being easily accessible. One of the examples I was looking at, which is in fact on our Good Academic Practices site, said, if you had a question like, what was the population of England and Wales in 1700? The proposition was that this would be difficult to find because it was imagining that you would go to various sites to research it, academics that could make a case for how they put the figures together and how they got it and all the rest of it. So I thought I would test this. So I typed it took me about 3 or 4 seconds to type in population of England and Wales in 1700, press go, and within a second I had exactly the right answer in front of me. So I think because search engines are now so powerful, you have to be very wary about thinking because something's very easy to get at as a fact, that you wouldn't have to reference it. So when you're thinking about do you have to reference or not, it would be wise to say, if I didn't have a search engine to find this sort of thing, would I have to go to academic sources for it? And if I would, then it would be wise to reference it. Does that help?
It very, very much does. And I know we've got some questions. I guess there's no harm in referencing just everything, though. Like, you wouldn't get marked down for someone saying that's common knowledge, you shouldn't have referenced that. But you make an important point, again, that it is all relative to both the discipline and the area and, of course, the question. I want to take some questions from the hot desk. HJ. Or Zach, even. Oh, no, HJ.
So some of the good questions that we got are around common knowledge. One of the good points that we have from Davin is common knowledge, students like cake. I think we can all agree on that one. I still haven't had my email of cake yet, though, so I am disappointed. But William's got a good point. He says common knowledge varies in different countries. So what could be considered common knowledge in one place could be a bit different from another. He's also said he's had comments from a tutor regarding what he did not reference, what he thought was common knowledge. So what do we do if we're unsure whether or not something is common knowledge?
Find a source for it and reference it. Is the thing. I mean, I think it's clear that, Paris is the capital of France. We wouldn't have to reference it as common knowledge. The sort of stuff we don't have to reference is normally fairly short, and on many occasions the general public would know as well as it being in your area. The Pythagoras one, I think that actually stands up very well, the Pythagoras one, because actually most of us that did geometry at school, that's the one theorem we can still remember. But I think beyond pretty small fragments, be wary and quote a reference
No,
if you're
absolutely.
using it.
The other important point, I think, is that no one is trying to trick students, particularly level 1 students. No one's going, ha, I'm going to get you to write about this, and actually if you don't put a reference, you're going to only get 60%. You know, it's all about enabling students, and often if it's in the module material, which should be the bulk of level 1 students, you know, work that they're citing really or using for their assignments, you know, they're really going to either be referencing the author of the chapter or some of the people who appear as secondary sources, so some of the names in the book that are referenced in the book. And I think if you follow those two guides, like it says this in the book, and this is the study who was written by this, which is put in your book, then you can't go too far wrong. Can we talk about some of the sections of referencing? Because I know this is one of the things that's come up with students about how to do what. And we were talking a little bit sort of holistically about primary and secondary sources. Can you explain them to us, Fiona?
Yes, certainly. One of the things I would like to point out, actually, especially to new students, is that at the Open University we use a style called OU Harvard. And you might Google this and look for Harvard references. And what you may not be aware of is the fact that there are hundreds of different Harvard styles.
Yeah.
And the OU Harvard is a particular version of it. So you need to use the OU Harvard guide. And you'll find a link to it on the library help site. And you'll also find a link to it in Student Hub Live in the resources section as well. And it should be available to you in the assessment on your module site. And my first key point is that you should go to the assessment on your module site, because that will give you all the information about whether you're using the OU Harvard guide and how to find it and how to reference in your particular module. There are a very few modules which use other styles, but the vast majority will be using OU Harvard.
Now, students can sometimes get very hung up on this because sometimes, especially if they download your extensive version, which might be useful
You've got a thing about it, haven't you?
I do have a thing about it. It's very long. And sometimes I think, you know, students only need to know a certain few things. Like, whilst it is comprehensive and whilst there are ways of referencing lots of things, most students at level 1, like I say, need to reference a couple of things, maybe module materials on the website on a multimedia map or something from there. But again, like, we're not there to trick students with this.
No,
so there are some bits that they'll reference a lot, like chapter authors, and some bits that they might not reference as much. But it's important to have a go at it, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And section 7 of the OU Harvard Guide is actually devoted.
Told you it was long.
It goes up to section 11, I think. But anyway, section 7 of the OU Harvard Guide is the bit on module materials. And by special request, Karen has actually asked me to do a worked example of referencing a video in module material.
Yes.
So I've done this for
you.
you. And this is a video which is in S111 called How to Detect a Secret Nuclear Test.
Okay, let me show students this.
Right, okay, you can show that. Yes, okay. So that's how to reference. So this is a video, and it's in the module material. Now, if you follow this up a bit, you'll find that it's actually on YouTube, and it has lots more details. But the thing is, you haven't looked at it on YouTube, and that's another key point I want to make, is that when you're referencing things, you reference what you've read or listened to or seen, rather than trying to sort of dig deeper and find a bit more out about it. So in actual fact, how to detect a secret nuclear test is section 7.5 in the module audio materials. And this is a worked example of how to reference a video in module materials. And basically you need the author, which will be the Open University in this case, the date, the title of the video, the fact that it's a video, which goes in square brackets, and the access date and the location, so that your tutor can see that that's where you got it from.
Now, if I were a clever student, what I'd do is I'd copy that and I'd put it on my desk with all the chapter references, and then I'd just change the names of the authors and the dates so that I had the right format.
That is exactly what you can do with the OU Harvard Guide. You just take an example out of the OU Harvard Guide and just put in the bits that you need and take out the example bits in the OU Harvard Guide, and it makes it so much easier. So this is one of the reasons why it's so long.
Oh dear. Now, we asked people about their feelings about referencing, and I'd like to just take a quick look at that to see what the general consensus is. Let's see what everyone had to say. Nervous, unsure, confused, worried, terrified, nervous of errors, pedantic, uneasy, inspired, pragmatic. Okay, there's lots of words here. A necessary evil. It's quite harsh, isn't it? No clue. Okay, so there's some value-laden terminology here, we might say, but a lot of negativity towards referencing. And as you say, it's a lot about convention. The point of referencing, let's not forget, is so that someone can go back to check these sources, isn't it? It's not about tripping people up about whether or not they put the comma or the italics in the right place. It is about saying, do you know where you've got this? And can I go and find it because I want to read more about it? Or maybe I'm going to actually have a look at that source because it's interesting. So the whole idea and the point of referencing is so that we can trace these sources and go back to them and find them. And of course, there's some things, in fact, some materials that I've had as references to follow up on that I can't find because they haven't given me the right information, which is really frustrating. But the key components then are fairly simple in terms of who has done it, when it was done, what it's called, where it was put, and maybe where in that thing it was put.
The key elements of a reference.
Lovely. Oh, you are good. See, I told you the library team are just fabulous.
You must have the author, the creator, whoever actually made the information that you're looking at. You must have the date. You must have a title so that we know what we're talking about. One of the things I have seen, particularly with my son when he first started referencing, was he just put a URL in the bibliography.
Yeah.
That is not helpful.
No.
So we've got the title, we've got the author, we've got the date, the item type. So, for example, if you were referencing something like a video, you would put that in square brackets. Publisher information if necessary, and the location you got it from, particularly for online material. URL's very helpful for your tutor.
Now, can you tell us the difference? Because you've given us the YouTube link and you had a big URL there, and sometimes we might have an online source as well. These are things that are published like forever in print and archived on the World Wide Web. But some things can come and go. Some things might change. There's certain things like I know on a lot of charity websites, there's particular research that they might populate on a particular cancer charity, for instance, that comes and goes. And so I can see then why that date of insertion or that URL might be appropriate. What's the difference then between stuff that's published that you reference that can't change versus stuff like maybe the YouTube link or the DOI that can change? Why are they important?
One of the things you must put in an online reference is the date you accessed it. And the date accessed is the key piece of information, so that if your URL doesn't work in the future, then
I thought it was so your tutor knew when you did the assignment. I'm joking.
Well, you should know, Karen, you're a tutor. No, the date accessed is a key piece of information for online information, and it's really quite important.
And that protects you then, that
that's
the
right,
link was
that's what
when
it
I
was
looked.
doing then.
But it might have changed now because people populate different sites.
That's right. Actually, I think Jenny wanted to say something about quoting, didn't you?
Yes, the last point, we must mention quoting.
Yes, well, I'd like to come from this from the point of view of, is something plagiarism or not?
Okay.
And I hope that we have managed to sort out the point about whether or not you would attribute that Wikipedia passage, because it was quite a substantial one.
Yes.
And the answer, of course, is that you would. And in all of the cases that I have had to handle, I would say that at least 95% and probably 98% is because the students don't put in a proper attribution when they copy stuff in. And, if I could pick up, you with great confidence said, when, we reference module materials. Well, the problem is students constantly don't reference the module materials. And
Because they think they're fact.
well, absolutely. I mean, the number of people over the years who have said to me about sites like Wikipedia and the module materials, but anyone can use it. I have no argument with that. You can use it, but you must tell me whether or not that you've copied it in, because the important thing is that the reader must know whether or not it's the words of the student that they're reading or whether it is the words of somebody else. And it's incredibly simple. So in the body of your answer, what you need to do is make quite sure that you give an in-text citation and that you put anything that you copy in quotation marks. And that tells the reader that these are not your words. And nothing could be simpler than that. So we've done this, we've said here, a quotation from Blogs 2007. We've put down what that quotation is because all those words have been copied from source. It's not been paraphrased, it's been copied wholesale, and we've put those in quotation marks. And although we've got them in red here, this is just so that you can see them. We would normally expect you to do that in the colour in which you're typing your assignments, but that's just a highlight. But it's fine, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm trying to make a judgment about whether something's plagiarism or not, I don't mind what colour it's in. If somebody says, everything in pink in this assignment is what my friend told me, no problem with plagiarism, but you might have problems with referencing part of it because you're not adhering to some conventions. So what could be simpler? You just need to indicate everything that you copy. Does
and
that
a lovely
help?
example, it does indeed, because this is a very emphatic point, which is a key use of a quotation, not just cutting a lump of text out and saying the theory is such, blah, because that doesn't demonstrate understanding, but you can see how this would be used to develop an argument. So again, it's thinking about using quotations appropriately. We are nearly out of time for today, as it always goes so incredibly quickly. Fiona, I know that the library team are coming back next week to talk about library services, etc. But can you just give us a quick highlight of what students might expect in the Being Digital activities and what support they can get from the library?
This is on referencing. Yes, that's right. We have 2 pathways in Being Digital, and you'll find a link to it on the resources page of Student Hub Live. And the first pathway is referencing, which takes you step by step through how to reference particular kinds of items and also through the principles of referencing. And then the second pathway is avoiding plagiarism. And again, that takes you step by step through what's considered plagiarism and ways of avoiding it with in-text citations and your bibliography in reference list in alphabetical order. Is that something that we ought to cover, the difference between a reference list and a bibliography, very quickly?
Very, very quickly, if you can wait 1 second.
Right, okay. Reference list is everything you've referred to in your assignment. A bibliography is everything you might have read, which helps you with your background reading.
But
we do get asked that,
in
yes.
sort of postgraduate study where maybe you've read some
Or even
methods
third
books.
level, that's right,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But certainly not anything to worry about at level 1.
That's right, yes.
No.
So those are and we also run a library training session, you might be pleased to know, called the Why and the How of Referencing. It's half an hour. I think the next ones are coming up next week.
Yeah.
But there are also recordings if you want to have a look at the recording.
Brilliant. Well, Fiona and Jenny, thank you so much. It's been a really, really useful session. And HJ has just put the link for that in the chat as well. So if you'd like to catch up with the library team and find out more about that, and there are loads and loads of other sessions, do check out your student homepage as well for news of events from the library and career service that can assist you in your study, in addition to obviously looking at your module website, which you will be pretty much doing constantly from now. So we've had a brilliant day. I'd like to thank all of our guests who've taken part in today's session. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to take a quick trip to the hot desk with HJ and Zach and have some last words from you too.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's just been so good chatting to everyone today, and we've got loads of good study tips, and there's been a lot of collaboration as well. We talked about that earlier, so we are collaborating digitally, so we can get our stamp for that. But Pauline's being very dedicated. She said she's going to get wireless headphones for next week because she's been scared to leave her laptop and miss anything. Good news is it's all going to be on Catch Up too, on our YouTube channel and on our website, and we'll put all the links in the chat. And Niall's done the same thing, got everything on the phone so can walk about listening to what's going on. But there's also been great comments. So a lot of people are a lot more confident. So Mary's a lot more confident, which is good to hear. And Davin says all the sessions are always good to attend regardless of where you are in studies, because it's nice to have a chat to people and just share ideas and see what's going on in the university. But Leanne feels a lot better being here today, and she's taken lots of notes. So that note-taking session did come in helpful for everyone, I think. But yeah, it's been very good. And I think we're very much looking forward to seeing people next week if you can come.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh, great. And Zach or HJ, whichever label, there's been lots of pranks going on with the names on the hot desk today. Students can, of course, get in contact with you if they're in the Faculty of Business and Law at the student support team as well. Might you just mention some of the things that people might want to contact their student support team about before they get allocated their tutor, etc., in their studies?
Exactly, yeah. So if you are having if you've got any questions or queries about your studies, anything to do with it really, whether it be disability support or planning your studies, not just module by module, but the whole qualification and where you want to be, then you can get in contact with your student support team, with us in Business and Law. If you just want to have a chat and we can kind of help either put in support, get in touch with your tutors about flexible study time if you need it. There's lots of, and anything in between really. So, do get in touch, do pick up the phone. I know we've had some chat about, being able to come forward and ask those questions, but just remember everybody is in the same boat and we're all here to help.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, we've introduced you to some really lovely, friendly people at the Open University today. I hope you've met some wonderful, friendly students in the chat and have enjoyed sharing your experiences. Thank you so much for participating. Don't forget, we've got 2 full days of events next week. I mean, if you think today's been difficult, next week we're going into the night and we're having lots of debate. We're having our Wheel of Ologies quiz. We're going to be hearing from lots of areas of the university, including the library, careers. We've got our Vice-Chancellor coming along as well. So we will introduce you to some key people, some practices, and show you a lot of aspects that will be really important for your studies. So enjoy the week, have a look around your module websites, have a look at the library, have a look at the referencing, engage with as much as you feel able to, and I hope that you're going to join us next week at the Refreshers Orientation event. Thank you for watching. That's all from us today. Bye for now and see you soon.